All right, in this demonstration, I want to show you a few things about the pen tool. So this is just going to be a really basic introduction, and I'm not going to go too deeply into it. So if you have taken an Illustrator class or you know how to use Illustrator pretty well, then some of this might be a little old hat, and but you can sort of skip through this a little bit faster by going through the speed. But if you don't know it, this will definitely help you out. And there might be some things, even if you do know how to use the pen tool, that you might learn just by, I'm going to show you also how you can manipulate existing objects instead of using the pen tool to draw everything. So first thing I want to show you is that this is the pen tool, and if you click and hold, it has different options under it. We're gonna start right now with just the pen tool, regular pen tool, and I want to show you the basic behavior of a pen tool. So if I click, like a single click, it drops an anchor point, and then you see it's going to try to add my line somewhere. And then if I go and click again, it adds a straight point, and if I click again, it adds another straight point. And you see that right now what it's done is, even though I don't have a closed path, see how it's still giving me the option to draw another segment of the line. It looks like it's filled, and that's because if you look over here, watch where I'm pointing, if you look over here, my fill is set to black, and so it's going to fill anything that is inside of the area of where that pen tool is currently clicked. Like, if I click over here, you'll see that it's going to change a little bit, right? And so it behaves differently. And so I can make any kind of shape I want. Now to close a path, I can hover over here, and you see there's a little circle that appears as I hover over that beginning anchor point, and that means that I'm going to close the path. So if I click on that, what it does now is, you see I don't get another segment when I'm moving my cursor around. That means that the object has been completed, it's been closed. It's a closed object now. And what I can do is I can click on the direct or on the black selection tool, and I can move that object around. I can scale it, I can do whatever I want with it, right? Just like any other object. I can rotate it and so on and so forth, right? So we've got this object here, and this was created by using straight points. And you can also create stuff with curved points. Let's do something different with the pen tool. So I'm going to start by just clicking, and then over here, instead of just clicking and letting, just a single click, I'm going to click and hold and drag. And you see what happens is that it starts to draw a curved line, and it draws out these handles. They're called handles, these little things that I'm currently turning side to side, okay? And what that does is those handles, the way that you draw them out, is going to control the way that the line is going to curve. And so now from this point, I can come off some other place, and I can draw another one. And if I want to click and drag, I can draw another one. So if I want to change the angle, for instance, of that curve, I can come down here and do so. All right, and then if I start getting into a tight area, I can, draw this, and you see it starts to do something weird to the shape. And I may not want that. If I want sort of a natural curve, I want to keep those handles short so that it allows for a natural curve, and then I can draw another point right here, for instance. And let's just say that I'm going to start to close this path almost in a boomerang shape. And the older versions of Illustrator don't show the way that, they don't give you an idea of the way that the line is going to be drawn. So this is really nice in this version of Illustrator. So if I come over here and I close this path, right, now we've got this sort of weird looking boomerang shape. And what ends up happening a lot of times is students will try to get a line perfect for a shape when they're drawing it, but it's really rare that you can get something perfect the first time. Usually what you need to do is come back and use some of the other tools. Let's move some stuff around. And you want to use this white tool. It's called the direct selection tool. And the difference between that tool and the black selection tool is that the white selection tool allows you to click individual anchor points, whereas the black tool will only select an entire object. So I can, for instance, click on this particular anchor point, and you see I get the handles, and now I can drag the handles out if I want. So I can start to refine the shape of this. I can move this in if I want to get a more natural looking curve. I can open that up a little bit, and then I can click here on this point, and I can drag it out and do whatever, do whatever I need to do to it to get this shape to start looking a little bit better. And see, this might look like a point to you where I've got my cursor right now, but it's actually a handle. And so if it doesn't allow you to actually just single click and select it and turn the color of the line, for instance, the line right now, for the selection line, I don't mean the stroke line. The selection line is currently red. Let's blow this up. And you can see that it's currently red, and it turns that anchor into a selected square, whereas all these other ones are empty white anchor squares. So that means that this one is currently selected. All right, so I can individually make changes to the handle and try to refine the edge of the curve and so on, right? And so you can kind of come back after the fact and start to refine some of your points a little bit. So, you know, maybe this is, I need to pull this curve in a little bit like that. Maybe I need to pull this in like that. Maybe I'd even need to pull this in quite significantly further. And then in that case, this maybe needs to change so that you start to get a more natural looking line. It's still not perfect, and it takes time. Whenever you do this, it takes some time to get your lines to look pretty, you know, pretty nice. Like, and then I could move this point in and then just change like the way that the curve is situated. All right, and so that starts to look a little bit better. And then this might be a little bit long. So it takes some time to get used to how these things work. And then you'll notice up here that there's like this hard edge. That's because the first point that I made with a single click, so that means it was a straight point. If I want to turn that into a curved point so that I can get handles on it, I can click and move it around, right? But that still doesn't give me the handles. What I need to do is go over here to this pen tool and click and hold it, and you'll see that there's an anchor point tool right here. And so if I select that, now I can click and hold and it drags out handles for me. And if I drag it the wrong way, see, it'll do something like that. Anyway, so I can drag the handles out, and then now that becomes something that's a little bit smoother, and I can come back up here and see how that looks. And I can move this point, oops, I can move the point, and I can draw, for instance, I can draw that handle out so that it starts to look a little smoother. Anyway, and so these are some of the ways that you can start to use this tool. And again, I'm not finished with this. I wouldn't say that this is complete. It's still a little wonky for a shape. And you know, like this is a little flat right here, so this is something that I would want to change so that that point is no longer quite so flat. And it takes a little while to get used to how these tools work. All right, that's a little bit of a better curve, but then that becomes flat right here. So as you change some things to get them right, others are going to kind of get a little messed up, and you might have to kind of go back and rearrange and sort of fuss around with them. And what you might realize is that if you get to a place where, like, this point, no matter what I do, it seems like somewhere it's going to be flat on either side, what that probably means is that I probably need to add a point to this line. If I wanted it to be a little bit curvier here, for instance. So I need another anchor point to pull up and add another set of handles. So to do something like that, I can come back over here where my pen tool was. I can click here and say add anchor point. Okay, and I can click on that line and it'll add a point for me. Oops. Here, let's select this again. Oh, okay, actually it looks like it did add the point. Sometimes if you like select that and you accidentally click off of it, it won't be selected anymore and you won't see it. So now that I have the add point, you see the little plus. I can't, if I click outside of it, it's going to give me this error and it's going to say please use the anchor point and blah 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 on a segmented path. So if you get that, it means that you're not clicking on a valid line. So I'm going to go back to use my direct selection tool so that I can click on this, and now I've got these handles, and if I want to select this one point, I can move it up, and you see that I'm starting to get a slightly more natural curve, and that looks a little bit better. And I could keep going with this, you know, like maybe down here I might need to even add another curve, or I can pull this up even further. You know, I can make it something, you know, that looks a little bit more like this, and then I could extend this out. So you start to see, like, as you add more points, you can start to get more and more of whatever particular shape you might be looking for, but you don't want to add too many points. You only need exactly the number of points that you need as a minimal number to get the shape you want. Otherwise, it'll start looking really jarred. You know, it'll start to look really choppy, and you'll get a lot of like harsh little lines in between. And so you want to simplify your paths as much as possible, meaning you want to use as few points as possible to get the shape that you're looking for. So this is not perfect. It's not ideal at this moment. I would keep working with this. In fact, what I might do is I might take this point right here and choose to go in to this anchor point tool, and if I click on it, I can make it so that it's a point, right? It's a straight point so that it doesn't have that curve attached to it. And then now what I could do is I could, maybe I can pull this down here and I can make this a steeper, deeper curve, right? And then maybe I need to add another point here. And so you can start to really, mess around with this in a way that will allow you to get a lot more definition. And so, maybe this needs to come out like that. And so that starts to look like a very different kind of line. All right, so you kind of get the point, no pun intended, right? So if we use the anchor or the pen tool like that, right? You've also got, as you can imagine, a delete anchor point tool. So if you have too many points, then you can also subtract points. So let's take that as an example. Here, let's select this object and we'll blow it up. Actually, I need to select it like with the white tool, okay? And then take this subtraction tool, and if I select that one, I can delete that, right? And then you could start to adjust the handles as necessary. As you might need to make those adjustments, right? And so that you can get this different shape. Now, the other thing too that you might realize that you need to do is you might need to move things in groups, so you might need to say, oh, okay, well, I want this whole section to be bumped in. So you could select multiples, and if I hold down shift, you'll see, let me blow this up a little bit. If I hold down shift, you'll see that this one's red, and then if I click on that one now with shift, these are both red. And I can nudge them with my arrow keys, so I can nudge them and it moves only the two anchor points that are selected, and it moves them in, right? And so I can start to manipulate it like that. And if I wanted to move more than one, then let's say, or excuse me, more than two, I could move an entire group, let's say, and I'm using my nudge tools again, and I'm sort of going down and to the right, and so it's squeezing this part in, and it's also dropping that down, right? So you see how you can start to really manipulate something and start to change the style of the line. Okay, so now that being said, some of the things that you might want to draw, let's say some of the things that you might want to draw would be like a circle or a square. Well, here's this tool, which you already know how to use, the square tool or the rectangle tool and the ellipse tool. Those are really normal tools, but let's say that you want to make a hemisphere or something like that, or let's say that you need to, work with that in some way, shape or form. No pun intended again. All right, so what you can do to make a hemisphere is it's going to be easier than drawing something with your pen tool if you just take the ellipse tool, for instance, and let's draw a perfect circle. And one of the things that you can see right off the bat is that it has 4 anchor points. It has 1, 2, 3, 4. And so the ones that you are going to need are going to be 3, so that you've got these 3 with a straight bottom connection, or maybe it's a half semicircle or something that's vertical. But the point is that you can start to use this perfect circle to get the effect that you want. And in order to do that, we can just there's some different ways that you could do this. And one of the ways that you could do it is you could take this pen tool, right, and you could delete this anchor point. I have these anchors that have curved points on the edges, on the ends, and this needs to be a straight line. And the problem is that I need for those to be flat. And so, but I don't need the whole thing to be flat, because if I go, for instance, and I take this anchor point tool and I just click, look what happens. It turns into this sort of eyedrop shape, or a teardrop shape, I should say. I'm going to undo that. So I'm going to take this anchor point tool, and instead I'm going to grab this bottom handle right here, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to hold the shift key down so I can strain the axis, and I'm going to snap it up there, right? It snaps right up there. Now you can also do that with the white direct selection tool, and you can click that and drag it by holding shift, and snaps right up there, and it works just fine. And there have been occasions, just so you know, whenever I've used this white direct selection tool to do that, and when it goes to snap, it'll do something weird to it. So just be aware that if you have that problem, sometimes you have to use this anchor point tool. to not click on the point, but to drag the handle in. So I've got this completed object that is a semicircle, and I can do whatever I want with it. One of the other things that I can do too, that's kind of cool, I'm going to turn my rulers on by doing Command R. Okay, and I'm going to drag a ruler out, or excuse me, a guide out, and I'm going to have it snap right here to the center point. If you don't have snap turned on, you can go to view and then say snap to point or snap to grid or whatever you want, but I'm going to do snap to point because I don't have my grid set up right now. And so I've got this snap to point, and I can do the same thing. I can take my direct selection tool here. I'm going to take this point and I'm going to hold shift down so it stays on the x-axis, and it'll snap right there to the center. And now all I've got to do is take this little handle and pull it in by holding shift, and snaps right there, and I've got a quarter, right? So I've got something that's the shape of a quarter circle. So that's some of the ways that you can like start to manipulate these things by actually drawing the objects first. The same is going to be true with a square if you want to start making triangles out of it and stuff like that. Same with star tool, right? You've got the same principles where you can delete and add and subtract points and things like that, so that you can take existing shapes that are perfect and you can make some of your shapes based off of those perfect shapes. The other thing that you can do is you can use the Pathfinder to create some of that stuff. So one of the other things that I wanted to show you, just so you don't get confused, is let's draw another one of those circles, and let's do this. And I clicked on this, and then I took the subtraction or the delete anchor point tool, and I had deleted this point. All right, and so what it did is it kept my closed path. If you make the mistake instead of clicking on the object that is a complete path and you select a point and you hit the delete key, all right, you just hit the delete key with something selected, that's going to be different. Okay, so I want to show you what I'm talking about. If I now select this object and I click to reverse this, I click to make a stroke, you'll notice that there's not a bottom line on the stroke, and the reason is because I didn't just delete an anchor point from an existing path, I actually deleted an anchor point, and what it did was it transformed the completed path of that object into a line segment. So that is the difference between this one, where if I hit the reversal, I have a completed path where you can see, and I'll turn off my guide, so let's do hide guides. Right, so you can see that this is a complete path and it has the stroke all the way around it, whereas this one is just a line segment. Right, if that is what you do, then what you can do to complete that is you can always pick up your pen tool. I'm just going to pick it up right here, and here I'll blow this up a little bit. And if I hover, watch what happens. If I hover over an existing open segment point, it'll turn into this sort of like forward slash. And if I click on it, what it does is it will pick up that path and allow me to continue drawing on that path. And so now I can come over here and I can complete the path like that. Okay? So that's how, if that happens, that's how you can remedy that problem. And the way to know if a path is complete or not is to flip back and forth between your fill and your stroke so that you can see what's happening. Okay? And if you don't see a stroke somewhere you expect to, then maybe you've got a line segment as opposed to a completed object path. All right, and so that's a really basic introduction to this pen tool. And in the next demo, I want to show you how you can use some of those techniques to kind of refine and modify some of the things that you've got in your files.